I would like to ask you some questions. Please try to answer shortly. I would like to start with Itai and Yuda, maybe a question to you. What do you think is the reason that Israel invests so much in water? Why so many ideas and innovative ideas are coming from Israel in the field of water?
I think that necessity is the mother of invention. I think Israel always knew that there was going to be problems with water. And as a result, as the professor spoke earlier, the greatest minds realized that in order to have Israel grow as a country, we had to find a solution. And I think some of the greatest minds looked to find a solution for water. And as a result, the advances made by these minds all throughout the last 30 years in Israel, from desalination, from atmospheric water generation, from plants, from hydroponics, from vertical fields. These are advances the world is learning from, and people are actually coming to Israel because we are a leader with our inventions. Our inventions work, and as a result of them working, the world is turning to us. But it was really necessity. We really needed to find the solutions for ourselves before we exported them.
Sure. I think just to add to what you said, it's kind of a combination of the startup nation, if you will, and the actual necessity to come up with solutions. And, you know, I moved to Miami Beach a year ago, and a month later, my little son came and sang a song he learned at the preschool, which is "Rain, Rain, Go Away." And I was like, rain, go away? No, we need the rain. So I think that kind of summarizes it. It's kind of a necessity together with the startup nation. I would say ecosystem that we have in Israel, where basically everyone can do something, or if they have an idea, they can make it happen in a way.
Yeah, no, I agree with my colleagues. I think for us in the field of humanitarian aid, I see we have about 25 water engineers in our team, and every time we take them to these places right after disasters, they thrive in chaos. When we try to take them to more organized places, they said, we want to go back home. So they really are looking for this chaotic situation. I think maybe it's our history, maybe it's our Israeli character. In these places where people are fighting for survival, Israeli innovation really, really thrives.
Thank you. My next question is for all of you, actually, is what do you think in the field of water, and also from your experience, Yotam, in the humanitarian field, but also related to water, what do you think Israel can learn from the US, and what do you think the US can learn from Israel?
Interesting question. When I studied the water issues around the world, there's two countries that really stand out, and that's Israel and Bali. Not just because of the physical conditions, but it's how they think about water. And Bali is a very interesting study area, because if you ever see pictures of Bali, you see these beautiful green terraces, and all the agriculture is worked on terraces. And the farm that controls the quality of water is the farm at the bottom of all these terraces. So they are concerned about the water quality on the receiving end of everybody else's problems. And they control everybody else. In the United States, it's absolutely the opposite situation. The people that own the highland own the water. They don't care about what's going on downtown. In Israel, another study area is it's a desert. And they solve the problem not because of the geographic limitations, but how they think about water. And that was very intriguing to me. So in terms of what the world can learn from Israel, it's just immense. It is the future. It is the way we should all be thinking about water. Decentralization of water, that's the key. Because when you're talking about reservoirs and aquifers and pipes and pumps and all those huge things that every city needs, it's just immense. When you have a problem in a particular city, whether it's New York or Flint, Michigan or Chicago, the solutions are immense. They're very expensive. What Israel is able to do, and with the people on this dais and other people and other concepts, are able to decentralize the concept of water. Now we're getting into a part of our history and our future where terrorism is a function. And it hasn't really hit, but at some point in time, reservoirs are going to be a target. How do we solve that? Well, one way to do it is to move immediately into decentralizing your water delivery system. What can Israel learn from the United States? Well, I can't be kind about that. It's probably the most important thing is to be transparent. And the United States was not transparent. You have to be honest with all the people of your country and let them know the status of the water, because people will come up with solutions by themselves as long as they know the facts. And in America, we're hiding the facts. So hopefully Israel will learn from our mistakes, and we can all learn about how to think about water by the people in Bali for thousands of years. Thank you.
I think what the U.S. and the world could learn from Israel is really how to find these creative solutions for water problems. I think, as I mentioned before, I think the possibilities within any given situation of water crisis or humanitarian crisis is, I mean, there's tons of possibilities and there's tons of options. And I think thinking outside of the box, finding these creative way, different technology, both low-tech, high-tech, not necessarily stuff that requires necessarily such a, big hardware component, is something that the U.S. could learn from Israel. And I agree with the need for transparency. I can share with you that when I was in Japan after the tsunami, the Japanese government wasn't at all transparent, and with contaminated water, with radioactive materials. So that's something definitely to learn, and especially these big economies like the US, like Japan, could do a much better job in this.
Thank you. I will ask one more question, and then maybe we will take one question for the audience or two. It depends if Ornit will let us. So my last question to all of you is if you can elaborate. We heard a little bit from Yotam what IsraAID did in Puerto Rico. I would like to hear from the rest of you, and also from Yotam, if you can elaborate more about your activity after the tsunami, after the hurricanes. Unfortunately, there were 3 major, or maybe 4 hurricanes hitting the U.S. one after the other. And after, I think, Hurricane Maria, we forgot a little bit about Hurricane Harvey, but they were really disasters for the population. And definitely water was one of the issues, the main issues that came up after this. So maybe we can, but really please short, so that everybody can relate to this.
So I think first that we as Watergen, we were asked by the federal government, which is probably a first as Watergen USA, but we immediately turned to our company in Israel. So it was the first time really that the American government had outside help after a disaster by asking, and we brought our machines and equipment and personnel from Israel into Houston. And then literally in 24 hours after Miami had their storm, we were able to, at the request of FEMA, literally pick up and move in an unprecedented equipment and personnel in 24 hours and be set up producing water from the air in Miami. So I think that is an area that people don't know about, but it was really a effort from the Israeli government, the American government, our companies, and so many personnel working together to get units set up in Port Arthur, Texas, and later on in North Miami Beach, and produced volumes of water, and many children, many schools, many parents, literally people were coming every day and filling up with water from a stationary position. So that's the first part.
We learned a lot, and I think the country learned a lot. I think the world learned a lot We were in Houston right after Harvey, Port Arthur, Texas, actually. And so we had to endure all of that. It was terrible, absolutely terrible. Whatever you saw on TV, I can tell you, it was a lot worse. And then, so that was right after Harvey. Then we went to Florida right after Irma. That was a thrill. That was worse because it was just more people in a lot tighter confines. And I live in Key West, so eventually I went to Key West, and guess what? I had to endure the same thing over again because I had no drinking water, no electricity, no communication. And we must learn from all of that. And water, you can't survive without water. You can survive without food for a while, but water, you just can't do that. You know, I've been in this business a long time, and it's amazing. I've learned a lot today. I really want to thank you for putting this on, because it was an experience that I learned a lot, that food equals water. That I'm going to think about a lot, because in the future, 7 billion people, that's going to be increased a lot. But at some point in time, we have to match our food requirements with water requirements. So there you go.
Just to add to that, and I agree with you. I think every state in the U.S. and every country in the world should have an emergency facilities that can address any kind of an emergency state, which, as we heard before, we're gonna have more and more of them. So I totally agree with you, and that's something that I believe we would start to see growing more and more in the next years.
When our team first came to Puerto Rico, they really couldn't believe that this is considered, and I know there's some issues about it, but this is considered part of the US. I mean, the team came from Haiti, which is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and they said Puerto Rico looked the same. They were really shocked, and they couldn't believe that this is the situation. And I think the biggest challenge is not just the immediate response after Harvey, after Hurricane Maria, is really how we could help. And I think there's a lot of things that Israeli companies like Watergen, like Woosh, like others could do, not just to respond after disaster, but to help communities prepare for disasters and do what we call disaster risk reduction. So I think that's something to take with us from this panel, and to see how we could partner with the US government, with nonprofits, with communities, with private companies, to prepare these systems and different alternatives in advance, because we know, unfortunately, especially Houston and Puerto Rico are probably the two most vulnerable areas in the US that are being hit by hurricanes on and floods on a yearly basis. So I think that's a key thing that we need to think about.
Thank you. Do we have one question? One question. One question from the audience. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, did any of you read that article, pardon me, in the Wall Street Journal a week or two ago about the severe drought going on in Syria and Iran? Apparently, within a few years, many of the provinces in Iran will no longer be hospitable for human beings. And it's already started. People from those provinces are moving out and into the larger cities.
Yes, and again, they're not the only places. As most of you know, on April 22nd, 2018 will be the 48th anniversary of Earth Day. And that's nice. People go out and do things that are good for the environment for one day. That can't be. We have to have, every day has to be Earth Day, because Earth Day is going to have another important impact. And that's the realization that in South Africa, they're going to call it 0 hour, because on April 22nd, 2018, Cape Town will also run out of water. It's not just happening there. It's not just happening because of climate change. It's because of lack of planning. Lack of planning. There are ways, if we were just had the technology that we have today, and we were able to install that technology in the areas that we're talking about, people would stay home. People would not be migrating so much. So in terms of world peace, in terms of world health, it's important that this technology reach out to these places and provide water, and it'll provide safety throughout the country and the world.
I would also like to add that we've been in places and have had many meetings, and you think about, you just mentioned Syria. There's places in California that have no water. There's places in Texas that have no water. You're not talking about Iraq. You're not talking about Syria. You're talking about in the 50 states here that are now looking for solutions to water. It's a global crisis. It's not one area. It's all over the world that has the same issue.
I think we could continue with this group of interesting people the whole evening. I would give each one of you 3 hours, but we don't have that. So I'd like to thank you very much so I can invite the next speaker. Thank you.